I'm Dr. Steve Shive from East Stroudsburg University in the Department of Health Studies. And I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you to this presentation on home hazards and ways to protect your family. What I'd like to do in this presentation is talk about the leading home hazards and, of course, ways that you can mitigate those hazards and protect your family. The 5 leading causes of home hazards include the leading cause of death, which is falls. So number 1 are falls. Roughly speaking, about 6,000 people die a year. The second leading cause of death is poisoning. And roughly we lose about 5,000 people a year to poisoning. Within poisoning, we're going to talk about general poisoning, but within poisoning, we also have a very pernicious problem, which often people don't even realize they're being exposed to, and that is lead poisoning. Roughly speaking, about 4 million households with children are exposed to high lead levels, and that equates to roughly about 500,000 children ages 1 to 5 that have blood lead levels above 5 micrograms per deciliter. And that's the level that's been identified as being harmful to health. The next leading cause of death is that of choking and suffocation. About 1,000 people die a year. Drowning, we lose about 800 people a year. And so what I want to talk about is, well, what heightens your risk to have a home hazard such as these? Let's start with falls. In general, what we find is falls affect the very elderly population in the United States and also the very young. Roughly speaking, we have in the United States about 2.4 million people who fall, but they don't die from them. But they're hurt bad enough that they have to go to a hospital emergency department for treatment. And of those 2.4 million falls, roughly about 722,000 people are hospitalized because of the fall. Also, falls are the leading cause of non-fatal injuries for that age population between birth and 19 years old. So we have the very young that are impacted as well. Roughly speaking, about 8,000 children are treated daily in U.S. emergency departments for fall-related injuries. Now, let's start with young children. What are some ways that we can prevent falls among young children? Well, first of all, we have to make sure that they play safely. Falls on the playground are the most common cause of injury, so we need to make sure that the playgrounds are well maintained. Also, many of the equipment, they should have underneath them very soft surfaces, like wood chips are very common, sand. We usually try to stay away from dirt or grass. Also, make your home safer. We don't want to have problems in the home itself. Use home safety devices such as guards on windows, especially if it's a multi-story building and if the windows are going to be up, there should be some window guards there so the kids don't fall out. Stair gates and some other guardrails that will prevent children from falling. These can help especially kids that tend to be very busy, all right? Also, any sports, keep the sports safe. How can you do that? Make sure kids wear their protective gear during their sports and recreational activities. For example, if they're going to be using inline skates, make sure they have wrist guards, helmets, elbow and knee pads. So any type of sport that they're going to participate in, you should know what some of the potential hazards are there and make sure the children are protected. Also, the other issue is supervision seems to be the key. We need to supervise young children at all times, especially where falls could potentially take place, such as stairs and playground equipment. So supervision is important. Now, what about prevention for falls among the elderly, people at the other level of the spectrum, end of the spectrum? Well, one of the things that's important for the elderly is that they get some exercise. One of the problems that contributes to people falling is the fact that they don't get enough exercise. So as a result, they tend to have weak legs. And weak legs contributes to the likelihood of somebody falling. So if they can participate in walking, even doing some exercises like Tai Chi, that can increase their strength and improve their balance, making falls less likely. Also, elderly should be careful of medications. Some medications or combinations of medications can have side effects that lead to somebody being dizzy or lightheaded. Oftentimes a doctor or even a pharmacist can help you determine whether or not a mixture of medications or a medication itself will give you that side effect. Also, the elderly need to keep their vision sharp. They should have their eyes checked annually, and if they do wear glasses, they should make sure they wear them and make sure they're the correct strength so that they can see properly. Another important way to prevent elderly from falling is to eliminate any kind of hazards at home, such as identifying potential fall hazards, that somebody might trip over things, for example, any clutter. So some steps to improve home safety include things like removing papers, books, clothing, shoes. One of the interesting things nowadays is sometimes there's multiple generations living in a household. So you might have grandparents living in the same household as very young children, and so you need to be careful that the children don't have the toys out that the elderly people could fall on. All right, so that's another problem. But also for the elderly, you can install handrails and lights on staircases so that they have something to grab on and that they can see very clearly. Remove any small throw rugs, or if you have to have a throw rug, put some double-sided tape so that the throw rug doesn't move. All right. Also, if you have anything that's going to be on cabinets, try to keep those objects that the elderly need lower, because you don't want them to have to get onto a step stool to get up into the cabinets where they could potentially fall off the step stool. So anything that they need access to should be at a level that they can easily access without stepping on something. Also, you can put grab bars in areas where it's critical that they could fall. For example, bathtubs and showers. On the shower, they can slip on shower floors, so it's nice to have a bar that they can grab onto there. Also, they should have some non-slip mats in the bathtub and on the showers. That will help them from slipping. And then in general, don't just improve the lighting on staircases, try to improve lighting in the home as overall. The older the elderly get, the older somebody gets, the more difficult it is to see, so they need brighter lights. All right. And then the other thing is, the elderly should wear shoes both inside and outside the house. Slippers and bare feet, there's more of a likelihood of falling. So if they can wear shoes, they're less likely to fall. The next third leading cause of deaths is fires and people getting burned by fires. Roughly speaking, somebody dies in a fire about every 3 hours. And in general, fire departments in the United States respond to about 1.2 million fires a year. And roughly about 85% of fires and people who die from fires occur in homes. So house fires are the major way that people do die from fires. Roughly speaking, we lose about 2,800 people annually to fires. And those are the people that die. We have about another close to 14,000 people that are injured from fires. And that's not including firefighters. Most of the victims who are in fires, they actually die from smoke and the toxic gases that are in the smoke, not from the burns themselves. So they usually die from smoke inhalation before they're actually burned to death. Smoking is the leading cause of fire-related deaths in the United States, and cooking is the primary way that we get fires in residential settings. All right. There are some groups that seem to be at an increased risk of fires. For example, again, we see, just like for the falls, we tend to have more problems with the very young and the very old. All right. So older adults, 65 and older, tend to have a greater problem, and we also see children 4 and under that have problems as well on the other end of the spectrum. Also, certain racial and ethnic groups are affected more than others. For example, African Americans and Native Americans tend to be affected more than other racial and ethnic groups. And unfortunately, our poorest Americans tend to be more affected by fires, and also people living in rural areas. Also, people living in manufactured or substandard housing tends to have more problems with fires. I don't know if anyone has ever seen a fire in a trailer. I saw one time. By the time I got to it, it pretty much was engulfed. But once they get going, they really do go up pretty quickly. So not surprising, some manufactured homes tend to have more problems than the general population. In terms of some risk factors for fires, over 1/3 of home fire deaths occur in homes without smoke alarms. So one of the ways we'll talk about that you can help reduce the risk of fires is to have a fire alarm. Almost 40% of the homes that end up catching on fire and people die from it, they don't have fire alarms. Most residential fires occur during the winter months, and unfortunately, alcohol contributes to about 40% of residential fire deaths. All right, so with that in mind then, with those statistics, what do we do about the problem? How do we go about preventing it? Well, first of all, never leave food unattended on a stove. Remember we said that one of the biggest problems are cooking fires. I'm sure, I know I've done this. I'm sure if you are involved in doing much cooking in the house, you've also done it. You think you can multitask. You leave something cooking on the stove and you go do something else, and surely you're going to remember it, and unfortunately you don't. And sometimes, I've had it. Fortunately, I haven't had it where they caught on fire. However, things really dried out. The pan superheated. Depending on what type of fuel you use, this can be more of a problem than others. If you're using natural gas, for example, and so forth. So don't leave food unattended on a stove. Don't multitask when it comes to cooking. Keep cooking areas free of flammable objects. Oftentimes we leave cloth pot holders there, towels, even some plastic wrappers can be available from things that were packaged like rolls or something like that. So avoid having flammable materials in the cooking area. Avoid wearing clothes with long, loose-fitting sleeves when you're cooking. I'm sure you've seen some movies that's somewhat comical where somebody's not such a good cook in the kitchen and all of a sudden their clothes catch on fire. We usually laugh about that, but you'll notice oftentimes it's loose-fitting clothing that catches on fire. That can happen in real life. Never smoke in bed or leave burning cigarettes unattended. Again, we saw that cigarette smoking is one of our biggest problems in terms of fires. Don't leave any empty smoldering ashes in a trash can. Always keep the ashtrays away from upholstered furniture and curtains. We have people that have smoldering cigarettes. They throw them in the garbage can and they cause a fire in the can. Keep all matches and lighters out of the reach of children. Store them up high, preferably in a locked cabinet. Unfortunately, at East Stroudsburg University a few years ago, we tragically lost one of our students who was living in off-campus housing, and apparently in the unit beside him, some woman got in the shower to take a shower, and one of her children started playing with matches, caught the place on fire, and unfortunately there wasn't hardwiring with alarm systems, and the student was sleeping in the unit next door and did not have a chance to get out of the building. He unfortunately and tragically died in that incident. So you want to make sure that you keep matches and anything flammable out of the reach of children. Never place portable space heaters near flammable materials, like drapery. You can catch the drapes on fire. That happens. Also, getting back to the fire alarms, install smoke alarms on every floor of the home, including the basement and particularly near rooms in which people sleep. All right, so the whole house should have smoke alarms that will notify people to give people time to react in the presence of a fire. If you have multiple units, as a landlord, you should have them hardwired so that if it goes off in one unit, it notifies the people in the other unit. We would rather be safe than sorry. Also use long-life smoke alarms with lithium-powered batteries and hush buttons, which allow people to stop false alarms quickly. If the long-life alarms are not available, then use regular alarms, but change the batteries annually. One rule of thumb is January 1st, the first day of the year, do a little examination of all your alarms in the house and change batteries that are necessary, or simply change all the batteries. Test all smoke alarms every month to ensure they work properly. So smoke alarms should be checked periodically. Also, another thing that a lot of families don't work on too much, but it's very helpful if you as a family can devise some way of escaping the house so that you tell your children, all right, this is the way you would get out of the house if you need to get out of the house. But then you should have some rendezvous point, some meeting place, so that you know that everybody got out safely. So they're not standing somewhere else while you're standing outside, all right? If possible, install or retrofit fire sprinklers in the home. This, quite frankly, is a big expense. In Pennsylvania, for example, a few years ago, they wanted to mandate that all new houses that were built would have sprinkler systems. People really fought that because it was going to increase the cost of building a home. Obviously, the cost to retrofit a home might be as much or higher. So that's a tough one to really convince people to do, but it obviously can save homes from burning down if all of a sudden the sprinkler system would go off. All right, another leading household injury is that of drowning. Roughly speaking, over a several-year period, an average of about 3,500, 3,600 people die from unintentional drownings each year in the United States. And these are non-boating related. If we add problems with people in terms of drowning from boating accidents, we add about another 350 people annually. So roughly about close to a little over 4,000 people drowned either through boating incidents or some kind of unintentional recreational activity. About 1 in 5 people who die from drowning, again, are children, 14 and younger. So for every child who dies from drowning, we have roughly another 5 who then receive emergency department care for non-fatal submersion injuries. So what that means is a child may not die from drowning, but they end up having to be admitted to the hospital because of the drowning incident. But they didn't die from it. Over half of the drowning victims treated in emergency departments, again, require further hospitalization. And these non-fatal drowning injuries usually are the result of severe brain damage that could cause long-term disabilities like memory problems, learning disabilities, or even a permanent vegetative state. What are some risk factors for drowning? 80% of victims who drown are males, and children, as I mentioned, have the highest drowning rate. Not surprising, children ages 1 to 4. And roughly more than 30% of those children 1 to 4 who had some kind of unintentional injury, it was due to drowning. Among those 1 to 14, it is the second leading cause of unintentional injury-related death. The other interesting thing is, again, some minorities have higher risk than others. For example, African Americans, they tend to, who are between the ages of 5 and 19, they tend to drown at a rate 5.5 times higher than those of whites. What are some of the factors that are linked to people drowning in swimming pools? One of the things that is a problem is they don't know how to swim. All right, and the other thing is that this is going to be one of the suggestions that we have when we get to prevention, is at least teaching people how to swim. So swimming is a factor as well. Okay, so how do we go about preventing people from drowning in the United States, especially children? Well, for one thing, make sure you supervise children when they're in and around water. Designate some responsible adult who can watch them, and especially for preschool children, you should do what's called touch supervision, which means you actually keep a hold of them. That way, if a child decides to jump in the water or do something out of the ordinary, or something they're not supposed to do, and you're looking another way or something, you have hold of them. All right. So you should be close to them at all time. Also, adults should not be distracted, like reading, playing cards, talking on the phone, or here's a big one, mowing the lawn. Right? I remember I would do just that, actually. We had a swimming pool at one time at this house that we had, and it had a few gates and rails, fences, before you get to the pool. So my son, he was just getting to the age where I was a little worried he might try to start climbing the fence to get into the pool area. And he was playing in a patio that was enclosed by a fence. And as I was mowing, I'd always make sure, even when I'd go around the house, I'd look at him at all times when I was in the back side, and then I'd quickly come around the front. Sure enough, and it doesn't take very long, it can happen very quickly. Sure enough, in the time it took me just to go around the front of the house, he was already making his way, trying to get up over the fence. So I quickly ran and got him, and knew that I couldn't do that anymore. All right. Before that, he really wasn't trying to get over the fence. But you have to be careful. That can happen quickly. Another suggestion is use the buddy system. When people are swimming, make sure they pair up and they're keeping an eye out for each other. If somebody is prone to seizure disorders and seizures, you need to make sure that they have one-on-one supervision, and you should even have them consider doing things like taking a shower rather than taking baths. All right, and certainly if they're going to be in water, they should wear a life jacket. Also, again, learn to swim. Even if you teach children, if they fall in, how to swim to the side to safety. At least they won't panic, and they may actually be able to do something that prevents them from drowning. All right. Also, another suggestion is to learn cardiopulmonary resuscitation. That's CPR. Obviously, if there is an incident, it's good to have that skill to be able to try to rescue someone. All right, and at least do something until the EMTs arrive. The other thing that we suggest is be careful that you don't think that air-filled or foam toys are safety devices. They are not safety devices. Kids, these are toys. They can be hanging on one of those foam noodles, and they can lose their grip, and now they have nothing to hold on. There's nothing that's going to buoy them up. All right, so these are toys. They're not like life jackets. And really, if they are going to be in water and they can't touch and so forth, they should be in some kind of life jacket. Also, avoid alcohol before and during swimming, boating, or any water skiing or any water-related activity. Roughly speaking, many individuals, there's a high percentage of people, if you look at boating accidents, it's related to alcohol use. I think of this every time, especially during spring break at universities. Usually around that time, I notice on the news, they'll usually go down to Florida somewhere, and they'll usually spot a college student who's doing some sailing on a sailboat, and you'll see them hold up the beer bottle. Hey, hey, they're all celebrating. And you think, tragically, most of the people that die from boating accidents, it's alcohol-related drownings. So try to avoid the use of alcohol before and during water activities. The other thing is, do not let swimmers hyperventilate and try to stay underwater for long periods of time. That can lead to somebody passing out, blacking out, and then actually drowning. The other thing is, you should know the local weather conditions and forecasts before swimming or boating. Oftentimes, storms will develop very quickly, and there can be lightning associated with it, and people can get struck by lightning. If you have a swimming pool at home, it's suggested that you install four-sided fencing. Most ordinances of local municipalities, they do require that a pool is enclosed by a fence. Also, clear the pool and deck of toys. Oftentimes, kids will try to get into the deck with the pool to get the toys. Sometimes even the toys will go into the water, and they'll go over and try to reach in and get the toy, and they'll fall in the water. All right. If you are in or around natural water settings, you should use U.S. Coast Guard approved life jackets. Again, make sure they're U.S. Coast Guard approved. There are also different types, and they should be fitted properly for the individual. All right. Also, know the meaning of and obey the warnings represented by colored beach flags. These may vary from beach to beach. Also, watch for dangerous waves and signs of rip currents. Sometimes you don't realize it, but you get out into the current, and the current's actually drawing you out deeper into the water. If you're in a situation like that, don't try to fight it, because it's going to exhaust you quickly. Try to go parallel with it towards the beach. All right, so run parallel and try to at least not get out deeper, but stay parallel with the beach, and you might be able to get out of that and actually get in closer to the beach. All right. Also, if you're caught in a rip current, it's not easy always to get out of them, but again, if you swim parallel with the beach, sometimes that can help you. But try to avoid the rip currents in the first place. All right, choking and suffocation. Unintentional suffocation or strangulation and choking kill roughly close to 1,200 children annually. Most of these, about 77%, close to 80%, are less than a year old. Roughly speaking, about 22,000 children are treated annually in emergency departments for non-fatal unintentional suffocation. It means they're in a suffocation incident, but they don't die from it. 22,000 kids. A third of these children, again, are less than a year old. So most infant suffocation deaths and injuries occur as a result of unsafe sleeping environments. So we're going to talk a little bit about what should the sleeping environment be to make it less likely for an infant to suffocate. Older children, they may have suffocation, entrapment, or strangulation incidents on playground equipment. Sometimes they're playing, they get things around their neck, and they end up suffocating or strangulating as a result of it. In most cases, suffocation risks are predictable and they are also preventable. Okay, so how can you prevent suffocation in your home? First of all, create a safe sleeping area, especially for infants. Infants should be placed on their backs on a very firm surface every time that they're laid down for sleep. The safest place is a crib or a bassinet. They should not be sleeping in bed with their parents. There have been instances where parents accidentally roll over on the child, and of course, when you're suffocating, you can't speak. They can't hear you. Also, they might be very young and they can't speak to begin with. All right, plus they're sleeping. The other thing is, keep soft objects like stuffed animals, blankets, and loose bedding out of the cribs. Nowadays, you want to dress an infant in warm clothing and put them to bed that way, so that it's on their body. It can't become separated from them and go around their face. All right. Also, you should not put objects like mobiles above the cribs. Stay safe during the meal and playtime. Cut or break age-appropriate food into very small bite-sized pieces. They're less likely to choke on it. Always supervise infants or young children during mealtime. Remember, choking is the silent killer. You turn your back on them, they start choking, you can't hear anything, you turn around and they're slumped over turning blue. All right, so again, make it bite-sized and keep an eye on supervised children who are eating. Try to discourage children when they're laughing while they're eating. We've all had this situation where we're talking or laughing and we accidentally inhale a piece of food down the wrong hole. All right, same thing with children. Try to discourage so that they're not laughing while they're eating too much. Obviously, mealtime should be a fun time, but be careful it's not too exaggerated. Also, read the age recommendations and choking hazard labels on toy packaging. And then again, learn CPR. In case somebody's choking, to be able to do the Heimlich maneuver is a very useful skill, and especially if the Heimlich doesn't work, what would you do next? So it's an important skill to be able to have. The second leading cause of household hazards in the United States is that of poisoning. Every day, over 300 children in the United States, ages birth to 19, are treated in an emergency department. And 2 children die as a result of being chemically poisoned. So what I'd like to do is talk about poisoning in general, and then we'll talk about a specific type of poisoning that is problematic. What are some ways that you can prevent poisoning? Before we had the child-proof caps, we used to have a lot more kids poisoning. But even today, with child-proof caps, we still get a significant number of people who are poisoned. Just a couple suggestions to try to prevent poisoning. One is lock any type of poison or medications up in some cabinet. Keep medicines, toxic products such as cleaning solutions in their original packaging where children can't see or get to them. Also, be careful of products not thought of as poisons. There are some things that we don't think of as poisons, but they really are. For example, children's vitamins are an example. Laundry and dishwasher detergent, especially the pods that they can put in their mouth, but even the liquid. Pest and rodent baits, disinfectants, fertilizers, weed killers, insect repellent, cosmetics, toilet bowl cleaner, kerosene, and even golf balls. Now you say golf balls, you think of maybe they could choke on golf balls, but they actually can be poisoned by them. Maybe here's the scenario. You put your bag in a closet, and let's say the ball bag is partially open. Now that the closet door is open, a young child sees the balls in the bag, goes into the closet, gets the ball out, licks it, puts it in their mouth, and now they might have some poisoning. Think of what poisons the ball is in contact with. Pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers. All right, and let's not forget the detergent to get those stains off the ball. Okay, so golf balls are in contact with a lot of chemicals and could potentially be a poison source, something we wouldn't even think of typically as adults. Also, be aware of the National Poison Control number, the 800-222-1222. That number will provide you with information about how to deal with any poison. Sometimes you have to be very careful of even the treatments that are found on the labels. Oftentimes these labels, they have either treatment information that won't do anything, or it may even cause greater harm. So if you know what the product is, call the National Poison Control Center number, and they will give you the latest treatment for it. But do read the label. I mean, the label will give you the information. It's also going to tell you what the chemical is. Also, safely dispose of any unused, unneeded, or expired prescription drugs and over-the-counter drugs, vitamins, and supplements. You know, we all have those outdated medications, whether they're prescription or over-the-counter, that, you know, we buy a cough syrup, we use half the bottle or 3/4 of the bottle, then we're okay for a while, we get sick again, and you don't even remember what you have, so you buy another one, but that old one's still sitting there. It's true of not only cough syrups, but lots of other medications and products in the house. There's even what's called a national drug take-back event in some local areas where dispose of them. You can dispose of them by mixing them with coffee grounds or kitty litter and throw them away. Also, they have these national take-back events where you can actually drop them off, and they'll be disposed of. One other type of poisoning that I want to address is something that is very pernicious because we don't always realize that we're being exposed to it, and that's lead. I want to talk about lead poisoning in the home, and I want to talk a little bit in reference to people being landlords and renters, where people are often exposed to lead through older homes. I want to talk here about what lead is, what are some of the dangers of lead, also talk a little bit about some requirements for disclosure, so that if you're a tenant, you should receive the disclosure statement. If you're a landlord, you should give it. And there's also, in addition to a disclosure statement, there's a Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home pamphlet that is available. First of all, lead, what is lead? Lead is a metal, it's a heavy metal, that occurs naturally in the Earth's crust, but we also use it a lot in human activities such as mining, and it's found in the burning of fossil fuels and manufacturing. And so it's very widespread, relatively speaking. Lead was also an ingredient that was used in paints and gasoline. And it's still used in batteries, solder. It's found in some older pipes, also pottery, roofing materials, and some cosmetics. And also it can be found even in things like canned goods that come from foreign countries into the United States. All right, so where is it found? Again, it can be found in paint and pigments, in water pipes. Usually the lead is not found in water as a source water. However, it gets into the water in the home through corrosion of plumbing materials. Homes that were built before 1986 are the most likely to have lead pipes, fixtures, and solder. The most common problem is that of brass or chrome-plated brass faucets and fixtures, which can leach significant amounts of lead into the water. And usually the biggest problem is hot water. So as the hot water comes through these lead-based pipes, these old pipes, a lead will leach into the water. Cold water is a little less of a problem. All right. As I said, it can be found in some canned goods from foreign countries, especially. It can be found in the soil. The major problem in homes is peeling paint, chipping paint. It eventually creates dust. Also, kids can actually ingest the pieces. And as I said, cosmetics, pottery, and some toys. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, more than 24 million homes in the U.S. have lead-based paint issues. And when children are exposed to lead, they're at risk for anything related to neurological problems. So they'll have learning disabilities, behavioral problems, seizures, comas, and even death. There are some fact sheets like this one that the Environmental Protection Agency and the HUD puts out. Again, explaining what I just said, some of the effects on it. But again, the effects are not just limited to kids. They can affect adults, and usually it's anything related to neurological functioning. All right. And they also get into, in this fact sheet, what is required under the law by sellers and landlords. All right. And typically the landlords and the sellers have to disclose if there's any potential lead available. Again, it's usually in houses before 1986, but the paints are actually in houses before 1978. That's when they stopped putting paint, lead-based paint, making it. But you might have old layers that are on there, all right? All right, So what is this disclosure regulation? We're trying to get the word out to landlords that they should be disclosing potential lead exposure in the homes. What we find is typically the ones that real estate agents own and lease and rent out, you usually get the disclosure statement. However, the problem is with some unscrupulous landlords that either they're not aware of it or they just dismiss it or they really don't care about it and they really don't bother to give the disclosure statements. So all homes before 1978 for sale or lease should have a disclosure statement. Also, any publicly and privately owned housing. And what's required is they should give out the free educational pamphlet, a warning statement in the contract that you could be exposed to lead, that there's lead available, and any known lead-based paint hazards or any lead-based paint that's present in the home. There should also be an opportunity for testing. Here's an example of a disclosure form. Again, there are numerous ones on the internet that you can get, but it basically is giving the warning statement and some check-off places, also lines where you can actually fill in what you know to be a problem, and then some check-off places and signatures that people have seen it and so forth. All right. There are some exemptions under the law. Any post-1977 housing are exempted from this. Any zero-bedroom units where the residential dwelling and the living areas are not separated from the sleeping area, that's excluded. Any housing exclusively for the elderly or disabled. Also, if the property is certified as lead-based paint-free, or there's been remediation, so lead has actually been removed and that's been certified. All right. Any unoccupied property pending demolition is exempt, and any non-residential part of the property is exempt. All right. Also, any rehabilitation or maintenance activities that do not disturb painted surfaces, and any time there's some kind of emergency action that needs to be done, they're exempt. All right. One of the requirements is that landlords and people who are selling homes provide this this pamphlet that's called Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home. And what's nice about this pamphlet, it gets into all of the effects on children. There's an opportunity for blood testing. In fact, most pediatricians, they usually give a little survey, and if anybody writes on the survey that they might be living in conditions that seem to indicate that the child might be exposed to lead, they do some automatic blood testing of lead levels. All right, but it talks about the ability to get that test, and it also talks about remediation of the home. So this is a really good pamphlet that gets in. It's about a 19-page pamphlet that explains ways you can protect yourself and the problem with lead and where you can be exposed. Again, it's something we don't want everyone to be paranoid about, but you can be exposed and not even know it. All right. Also, some websites like this Pennsylvania Housing Search can give you some resources about lead-based places. Okay, so what are some recommendations, ways that you can protect your family from lead? If you suspect you have lead-based paint in your home, get some advice on safe removal from any housing and urban development authorities. You can also go to the Pennsylvania State website for lead. Do not remove the lead yourself. You really need to have somebody who knows what they're doing. You might want to go to your city health department if you have a local health department. Talk to them. There may be some money available for lead abatement and lead removal. Keep your home as dust-free as possible. Again, if the lead starts flaking and you get dust, if you keep removing that dust, you're going to be less exposed. Have everyone wash their hands before eating. So if they do have some dust on their hands, they're not getting it on food or eating implements. Have everyone wash their hands before eating, and also throw out any old painted toys if you don't know whether it contains lead or not. If these are old toys, they might have lead in it. Get rid of them. Also, again, if you have any questions about your child being exposed, get a blood lead test. If your water has tested high in lead, consider installing an effective filtering device or switch to bottled water for drinking and cooking. Clean the floor, window sills, door frames with some solution of what's called powdered automatic dishwashing detergent called trisodium phosphate detergent. That'll help mitigate the lead a little bit, or some lead-specific cleaning product. Teach children not to put any sand, dirt, or paint chips in their mouth. Also avoid any canned goods from foreign countries because some of them still may have lead in them. Do not store any liquors or vinegar-based salad dressings in lead crystal decanters for a long period of time. We're finding some of the crystal, nice crystal, even may have lead in it. Might be lead-based, and the lead can leach out. A balanced diet that includes adequate levels of vitamin C, iron, zinc, calcium, and phosphorus can help reduce the absorption of lead. And cover any old paint, layers of paint that you might have in your house. If the paint is on tight without many chips, you can paint over it, and that will reduce the exposure. There's other things you can do, like paneling, drywall, and even an encapsulation, which is very similar to very thick coat of paint. All right? And then sometimes people actually bring lead from their workplace. Wear protective clothing on the job and equipment. Also, any jobs or hobbies where you're at risk of lead exposure, instead of bringing it home. For example, some places like shooting ranges, stained glass, construction, auto and radiator repairs, artists, sometimes it's in the paint, battery and glass manufacturers, lead smelters, painters, plumbers, and others, they may actually be exposed to lead. They should make sure they're wearing protective clothing and equipment, and then leave them at work. Even try to get a shower before you come home so you get it out of your hair and things like that. Get it off your body so you're not bringing it to your home. Especially do not shake out work clothes in your house and so forth. Also, use only cold water for cooking or drinking. Hot water is likely to have higher levels of lead than cold in older homes built before 1986. If you rent, ask your landlord, especially if you see some problems, ask the landlord to remediate them. They may be able to have access to places that have funding or contractors that would be able to do that. The other thing is, renters and landlords should be aware that there are penalties for violating the lead disclosure rule that could result in civil or criminal penalties. Real estate agents, landlords, or sellers can even be fined up to $10,000 per violation, or costs of up to 3 times the amount of damages to tenants or buyers. So we're really trying to get the word out. If you're a landlord, be aware that there are some penalties if you do not do something about the lead. We want to try to avoid problems for both tenants, but also avoid problems for the landlords. There are some numerous sources about lead if you want to get further information. One site that we've developed at East Stroudsburg University is at quantum.esu.edu/lead_awareness. Also, the CDC has a lead website, and also the Pennsylvania State Department of Health at www.health.state.pa.us/lead. All right. Again, all this information is available, including this PowerPoint presentation. So, I'd like to thank you for listening to this presentation. Again, these are the leading household injuries that really cost thousands of people their lives each year, and pretty much many of these are preventable. There's always something that's unusual that may happen, but with a little thought and preparation, we may be able to drastically reduce the effects of these problems, especially the second leading cause of death, poisoning, where something like lead poisoning might be something that people don't even know that they're exposed to. So hopefully, armed with this awareness, people can better protect themselves.